Hey everyone, it's Fahim, and I'm doing my presentation on my group's app, which was a texting app. And the study, so I'm going to go over that app and the study to go along with it. So what is this proposed product? Well, this technology would be an app that would allow someone to set reminders for their users to respond to text later. Sometimes we might not want to respond to a text right away, right? If we're busy or doing something, or we just don't want to, but we do want to respond to them at some point. This app would allow us to put a notification on that text for us to go back to it. A comparative given was Gmail, as they notify you to reach out to forgotten emails sometimes. So how does this app work in a social informatics arena? Well, seeing as social informatics is about the greater social context of the technology, texting is a perfect area for this because texting really encompasses our lives right now. Texting is such a big part of our lives and our social lives right now. So if we can make an app that aids in elevating our texting experience, we're making an app that elevates our social experience and our social lives. So this app in turn has a lot of social context to it. So what are some possible questions that can arise from developing this app? One would be how would this app change texting etiquette? Texting etiquette would be stuff like how you respond, the vernacular you use, your diction, when you respond, things like that. So things that contextualize how you text. This is related to question number 3 too. What factors influence texting habits? Texting habits would be again like when you reply, how you reply, why you reply, what influences you to reply. So these all relate to social context clues, which is why these are good questions to ask in a social informatics environment. The second question is, why is focusing on relationships around texting important, and why is this app worth the use? And this is actually the question that I'm going to be choosing. So the reason I chose this question and the reason I think this question is important is because relationships are really the cornerstone of texting, right? So why would you be texting someone if you're not in some sort of relationship with them? Whether it's a work relationship or a platonic friendship or a romantic relationship, you generally are in some type of relationship when you're texting someone, which is why I thought this question would be good for this type of app. This question also lets us see what, why, and when we use texting for, and it offers a broad context, being the social context of texting, but a specific aspect to focus on, which is relationships. Also, like I was just saying, it gives an angle for why this type of app is worth creating. If we are able to augment our in-person relationships through texting, then obviously that's great and important, right? So if we're able to augment our relationships in a positive way, then we can create an argument for why this app is worth creating in the first place. So the study I chose was a study on long-distance texting and how people use mediated communication methods in long-distance relationships and how they differ from how they're used in close-distance relationships. So what's the purpose of the study? Well, the gap here is that previous studies in the field of relationship communication was conducted prior to the rise of mobile technology. So this means that results in relationship communication studies might not be relevant as of right now. We have all these new tools like social media and texting and calling that any results from studies of relationship communication might be different now, so we have to account for that. And this study aims to do that. And they also aim to compare how long-distance relationships and close-distance relationships differ in communication medium usage. So keywords here are long-distance relationships, LDR, and geographically close relationships, GCR. And the hypothesis here is that participants in LDRs would report more frequent texting, voice calling, and video calling compared to those in geographically close relationships, with the biggest difference expected for video calling. And we'll touch on that more later, but the biggest difference actually was not video calling, it was text messaging, which is why I chose this study for my question. So what is the demographics of this study? Who were the participants? So a sample of 1,496 adults were chosen, all aged 18 to 25, and 3/4 were female. In case that sounds confusing, both participants of the relationship did not have to be present. It was just one half of the relationship, which is why 3/4 were female. The mean relationship duration was 2 years, well, around 2 years. Around 90% identified as straight, and around 1/3 were in a long-distance relationship. And how was the data and results given? Participants were given 2 questionnaires. One covered the communication frequency and responsiveness, and another questionnaire focused on overall relationship satisfaction. The way these questionnaires worked is that they were given questions, or not questions, but they were given statements, and they were measured through a 6-point Likert scale. A Likert scale is a type of scale that's like not really, average, most likely, that type of scale. So then, once these results were found, they were analyzed and conducted through the SPSS version 24 to find plot data and line graphs and standard deviations and all that. So what were some of the major findings of this report? I'm not going to go into the specific data results like standard deviations and all that. I'm going to go over some of the more qualitative findings. So those in long-distance relationships use remote communication methods more frequently than those in geographically close relationships, with texting coming out on top. So the overall hypothesis that those farther away would use more communication methods did ring true, but the aspect on video calling that I had mentioned on previously was false. They found that texting came out on top. And this relates to the second finding, which was that greater texting responsiveness was tied to increased relationship satisfaction for those in long-distance relationships, but not those in close relationships. There's no concrete reason given for this because people did not give away the contents of their texting. However, the researchers presumed that this was because in closest relationships, people in relationships might not be texting as intimately. They might be texting to more so set up times for in-person meetings, whereas people in long-distance relationships actually have to text more to communicate and have a conversation. So because of that, they might have more relationship satisfaction tied to texting. And other similar studies were also referenced here, which cited similar results in texting and increased relationship satisfaction due to texting. For example, a study by Brody and Pena in 2015 and Slatcher in 2008 noticed greater benefits of texting in relationship maintenance and providing assurances and expressing affection and appreciation for the relationship because of texting. So how reliable are these results? I would say that these results are pretty reliable in that they are presumably accurate feelings from the participants. And the sample size was relatively large, meaning that there was a lot of ground to work on. And the results were synthesized with other similar studies like I was just saying. And also this, something I want to mention that wasn't in this study particularly, but another study I found was a study on how the internet brings people closer together. And this study also found that the internet does more often than not bring people closer together in a real life environment, which only adds to the results found in this study. And then thirdly, the data interpretation method allowed the researchers to view qualitative data in a quantitative environment and also to view the quantitative data from the Likert scale in a qualitative environment by making inferences off them. So what are some limitations here though? Well, this study is more correlational in nature than causational. So we know that correlation does not equal causation, and that's an issue in this study. Because, like I said, we didn't have the contents of the texts or calls, we don't exactly know what is being said every time they text or call. So we can't make a concrete conclusion that something happened because of something. We can only assume that they're correlated. Also, the groups were not really evenly spread out. If you remember back to the demographic slide, it was pretty skewed towards one direction. For example, most were female, most were straight, most were white, and also most were in a geographically close relationship. So if they were more spread out, the results might differ. Other relationship characteristics like socioeconomic status, mating conditions, etc. weren't factored either. And like I said before, the actual content of the communication was not peered into. And I've been kind of alluding to this whole time, but how does this study relate to our product? Well, this study allows us to view the value in the app in the social context of being in relationships. And like I was saying before, relationships are the cornerstone of texting, right? Why are you texting someone if you don't have a relationship with them in some way? So we see here that this study proves how texting actually augments relationships in a positive way. So knowing that, we see how we get an angle for why texting is valuable. And by getting that angle of why texting is valuable, we have an argument for why creating an auxiliary app for texting is worth it in the first place. And something from the text that I want to pull to or point attention towards as well is a segment that says, as these researchers Tong and Walther have pointed out, lightweight tools like text messaging may be more appealing and effective than phone calls because they enable users to engage in frequent relationship maintenance without a great deal of time and effort. So this really plays to the strength of texting, because video calling and phone calling, you might have to set aside time actively to do that type of communication, whereas texting, you can do it wherever you want, whenever you want, is very convenient. So this notification app also plays into that aspect of convenience. If you can notify yourself to respond to this person at a later date, then it only plays into the convenience of texting. So understanding that this app, one, plays into the convenience of texting positively, and two, positively augments the relationships of the texters, it gives us a reason for why this texting app should be created. I hope that was a convincing argument for you guys. Thank you for watching.